Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's quick episode. I want to speak about the source of suffering is misunderstanding, or I don't know, maybe I could write the title as Misunderstanding is the Source of Suffering. And so recently, guys, something interesting has come to my attention. I simply, well, first of all, let me give you a kind of context to this episode. Certain traditions see that as you want something from a temporary landscape, and as you want certain things from a temporary landscape not to change, in their inevitable change you will suffer. If we wondered before what suffering is, what a state of non-suffering is like, it would be a state that is not bound by a certain consequence of a condition. So in some sense, in front of our eyes, we're conditional creatures, but behind our eyes, the conditions are different. They're more flexible. A person can see himself in a different light behind his eyes than he sees in the light in front of his eyes. What that means is in front of your eyes, you are who you are physically, but behind your eyes, this physicality is inspired and motivated by various parallels of self. Now, I have been for a couple years wondering about the multidimensional nature of reality. I noticed that we start from simple, go to complex. So I was thinking for a while, is it that there are, as we reverse engineer, kind of go back to the source of intelligence, we're coming to more simpler principles of the cosmos. And I realized that we have to consider man as in two worlds. And this is the main reason that our knowledge has bias. When they say history is written by the winners, guess what? The winners only shared their eyes. So what it is that the person opens their eyes in a world that appears to them as various worlds throughout their lifetime. Appears as various ways it is alive. There's been times where I have seen things in society that have kind of shattered me into 1,000 pieces. It's like it just breaks you. Some savage things you see in life, they just show you what kind of how this earth has a potential to be like hell. But there have also been moments where I have seen certain heavenly movements. I have seen people more compassionate than me. I remember I was walking downtown, and there was this drunk homeless man who was stumbling. He was on the other side of the street. I was waiting for the light, and he's on the other side of the street, and this man is stumbling, and out of nowhere this guy goes and helps him from falling right last second. And it's as if I wondered why. Do you know, why do we care? And it's fascinating because we see our own eyes in others, and they see their eyes in us. And what that means is, as much as you see other people, simultaneously they are being a projection of your intelligence. It's very important that the audience, for me to give justice to this talk, it's going to be like, I want you to have this image. The title of the talk was inspired actually by a story. And the story was that there was this little kid, and his parents come and tell him, that you're gonna. There's this little girl who his parents come and tell him, you're gonna have kids one day. You're gonna be this, and you're gonna be that, and you're gonna be this, and they make the intensity. They make life so intense to the kid that the kid's like, why do I need to even go to school? Why do I even need to go to this? The kid cannot handle. Whenever you give someone more than they can handle, they usually put it down and get upset at the world. So it's very important because I feel the species doesn't know its own strength. And the moments that it demonstrates it are moments where it's retaliating against its own past. One thing I know immediately, whenever whenever you notice a being that cannot control their free will, they are not aware that they have control. Usually these people, karma has to give them a teaching of control. It's Anyways, the image is there's this young girl, really young girl. Her parents give her the scale of life, tell her you got to go do this, do this, do this, do this. And she gets so overwhelmed that it's easier for her in that moment to question the whole thing than to go through with it. And I wondered, wow, that girl was suffering, because she, in some sense, was given the scale too soon. The world had become a vision in her eyes that was too heavy for that self in the moment. Like right now, if you come and ask me about, for example, basketball or something, I may not know as much. I know the basics, but I may not know as much. Do you know? And imagine, how do I take this? Here's the simple suggestion. There is a chance that, let's say, your suffering is actual suffering. You're actually suffering. It may be a loss, it may be some sort of pain, internal or external. But there is a type of suffering that only through the realization of misunderstanding you free a new way you can understand life. Do you know, it's like with every thing that became certain for me, it's like hundreds of other things became uncertain. You can, as one's scope, imagine you're in a building and you keep looking around and you see the hallways and you eventually see, holy shit, like there's so many rooms in this building, you know. Pretty much, guys, just I'm trying to make this point that our suffering is misunderstanding, and simply because our what we see as suffering is a view on life, and there are many views on life. Just like how there's an object, I firmly believe this, just like how there's an object, and imagine like an object is in front of you and you go do a 360. You look at the object from different angles, from different positions, from different senses of locale and space and time. Similarly, one can observe their subjective life and one can even witness their life from various states of being. But it all depends on how much your reality is a conditional phenomena for you and how much it's an unconditional. When it was a conditional for me, I felt that I had the burden of knowing everything in every moment. When life had a sort of strange conditions in accordance, everybody's conditioning makes life seem like a sort of condition. And so it was only when I could notice beyond my conditioning that I freed myself from it. that I realize who is telling me I have to be me. Do you know? And I realize only I am. Only my attention is navigating my reality. Attention is so important. It's so important that hopefully I've kind of dedicated my life to this, to kind of open schools of advanced communication. There's so much more to the intelligence of the human being. There's so much more. There's definitely like incredibly like lots more. Vision is very crucial. Vision has a beauty. You got to realize that sometimes art, I find, the creative vision is actually like an unknown crevice on a known wall, as if you have lived in the same house your whole life, but it's the same ideological house. You have never stepped beyond a certain range of ideology. You know, we can say that the creature, the human being, finds certainty in actions it is familiar with. And what is familiarity but the repetition of the pattern? That means if we only want a logical civilization, we will forget about all the values of the irrational. And sometimes the irrational is required. Sometimes the order needs a spice of chaos. Sometimes the chaos needs a spice of order. Sometimes the yin-yang symbol has a singular momentary conclusion. That means if you even look at the yin-yang symbol, what's the first thing you realize? All of it is in one circle. So in one moment, chaos and order are dancing within one another. Misunderstanding is the source of suffering for that child who was told was given more responsibility than the ability to respond to. Whenever this happens, you get pushed in your inner realms. I'll tell you this happens everywhere in the world, guys. Imagine person A is standing somewhere and person B comes to person A and says something negative to person A. Say, da 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 da, like, you know, you're this and you're that and you're this and you're that, right? So person A can acknowledge person B, you can respect person B by believing what they say. Or you can in some sense see person B doesn't know person A. And regardless of what person B has said, person B does not have person A's eyes. That means for person A to feel judged by person B is person A's downfall. Do you see what I mean? Your world is an expression. It's an expression of energy. Okay? It's an energetic expression, and we are extracting patterns. It's like I sometimes ask myself, where's the meaning of the world? Where are all these laws and theories of science that I've learned? And I realize they are behind my eyes. Even though the objective realm is in front of it, but the theories, the ideologies, the principles, the constants, you know, the formula, it's behind. It's behind one's eyes. And what is behind your eyes but the awareness of the whole moment? That's the significance of it. You know, we are kind of like a species that has treated ourselves as a self-autonomous car, only to discover that there is a driver within that is made of a constitution that is biological. Do you know that means you are not the vehicle you navigate? Your attention is not its content. The content in your attention are defined by your attention. So what does that mean? Imagine your attention is a flashlight in your hand, and at night you've gone by a river, you know? I had this experience as a kid, and I put the flashlight on the river. You know, when I put the flashlight on the river, it was as if like a chunk of the unknown movement was suddenly in view. There's somebody who wrote this book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. Somehow I remember the book. I don't remember the author. But he said something. It's very incredibly in that book. It seems that he said that it's like life is like the person is born and takes a handful of sand from an endless beach. Do you know what that means? That means everything you as a person know, everything I as a person know, everything we as creatures, as people know, is a handful of sensory perception. And you can get occupied by your senses. Your senses can become the obsession of self. That's why I think the reason the civilization is being inefficient, because the human being doesn't realize it has to go through a metamorphosis in the lifetime. People are living as if their past is the only thing that matters about their future. How their past enters the future. There are various senses of self, especially when you really experience altered states. And when I say altered states, you see there's states that alter the inner realm, and there's certain things that alter the outer realm. In regards to what alters the outer realm, I can tell you it has a chemical orientation. What alters the inner realm has a free will orientation. It has to do with effort, with intentions of effort. That means, like, imagine you're walking by the fridge and you suddenly feel thirsty and you get yourself a glass of orange juice, you know? So what is that? That was like you walking, certain requirement, a certain demand, and then you supplied yourself with your own demand. Isn't that survival? The creature is demanding continuity and it's supplying it for itself, or at least it's being supplied for. What we realize is that the more we go back in history, the more important it was to be independent. But when we see the more in 2020, it's more important to be dependent. And the reason is because of the advancement and sophistication of our communication and minds. That means in this life nowadays, you have to depend on others. You have to, I don't know how to say it, but life progresses upon our subjective dependence on one another. Right? And that subjective dependence weakens when we feel our independence is only our own survival. The issue is we separate the self from the world, not realizing they're simultaneously present. And this is the source of the great devastation. That man has separated himself from his world rather than realizing it is his world that defines the edges of his separation. So it's like one day waking up and realizing existence is your ancestry. There have been moments, I remember I was at a gas station. I was at a gas station, and while I'm filling my car with gas, I'm just looking. I just remember I was looking in the distance, beyond like this intersection, and just looking at the distance. Sometimes I look at meaningless stuff only to see the meaning was never outside. And I was looking, and for a second it was like such a profound experience. I felt my eyes had never been closed ever. I felt I was a creature that it was impossible to sleep. I began to realize eternity needs no story. Life is definitely fascinating. It's something where one's motivation arises from our attention. And check this out. We do think that intelligence is about like the person goes to the gym, and maintains their physique. So similarly, the person's like, how do I maintain my mind? And so some people exercise their minds to the last. It's kind of. It's sad, and it's nice and sad at the same time that the scholar has an honor to know till the last moment, only to realize that transition will come. That means, just think about it, guys. I want you one day, to just give yourself full freedom to judge yourself. Just give yourself freedom to judge yourself. Judge yourself. It's okay. Like certain days, let yourself kind of experience the chaos, and then certain days let yourself experience the order. Internally, of course, I'm speaking, because external chaos is a no-no. I'm not any person who hears my talks and feels that the wars of the external realm will end soon, very soon. And it's really crucial that the human being realizes what is actually here. I find true knowledge doesn't begin unless you discover the great lie, the lie you have said to yourself about yourself. The mind is a very incredible mover. I remember in 2015, where I was still in the UK giving these talks. Of course, I was there for educational purposes, but I remember that I was walking down, it was one morning, and my mind playfully, look at how playful our minds can be. My mind, as I was walking down the street, just imagined, okay, what if an animal was the size of a building? And my mind could visualize in that empty street a giant lion running, you know? A giant lion running between the thing, you know. And so I realized that it's fascinating that we know so little about our emotional dimensions, about our subjective realm and objective realm. Objective realm we know a lot, to be honest, but the subjective realms we don't know that much. There are mysteries that are occurring right beside us, that are living among us, and we don't know. Now let's consider that misunderstanding is the source of suffering. So an example of this, I'm trying to think, is that, let's say if we accept that misunderstanding is the source of suffering, that would mean when we suffer, there is something we're not understanding about the situation. There are hidden dimensions which we don't have access to, you know? There's something incredible about that. I don't know, about a hidden dimension. It's kind of like with it, there's a hidden potential too. There's something hilarious that Alan Watts says. He says the fish that had fallen out of the water, the monkey came up to the fish and he's like, "I'll help you," and put the fish on the tree. And our attention is the key to all realities. Any person who understands the secrets of their living attention, you know this sector. You'll realize there's no subjective or objective truth to it. It's a rhythmic abidance ultimately. That means if somebody says, "Okay, Mr. Within, say it straight. Say it straight. What do you think is happening on this planet?" And if I was to say I have a chaotic explanation and an ordered explanation. The chaotic explanation that this planet is actually an empty rock and there are these giant spheres moving on the surface of this empty rock simulating all of reality. This is one way the view has opened to me. That this is the chaotic version. The ordered version is that we are the children of higher dimensions. We are not a simulation. We're not the imagination of higher dimensions. We are the truth of higher dimensions. You know? And this is something that nobody could have ever commented on, guys. Is reality an objective? Like, I don't know how to say it, but is it, what is deciding? What is deciding a pure objective analysis? What if we are bodies in one dimension, minds in another? Rene Descartes, this French philosopher, he thought like this. They call it the mind-body dualism. You know, Rene Descartes felt that the mind was in its own dimension and the body was in its dimension. Bodhidharma, this Japanese Zen master, he felt the mind wasn't even here. Somebody came up to Bodhidharma, the Zen master, and he's like, "Please pacify my mind." The guy's like kind of really desperate. You know, the guy can't sleep at night and he's desperate and tells Bodhidharma, "Please pacify my mind." And Bodhidharma says, "Okay, you want me to pacify your mind?" Like Robert De Niro. It's like, "You talking to me?" And he says, Bodhiyama looks at the guy and says, bring your mind in front of me and I'll pacify it. Bring this mind that is keeping you restless. Bring this mind that is your source of suffering. Bring it in front of me and I'll pacify it. And this guy, for the first time in his life, tries to find his mind. It's always funny when people go looking for their mind, you know? It's like the mirror always says, I told you so. The guy looks at Bodhiyama and says, I can't find it. I can't find it. I can't find my mind. As if the mind was on no shelf that this man could reach. And Bodhiyama looks at him and says, there, your mind is pacified. And you know how he solved the problem there? Rather than the guy thinking he's unfortunate and wanting to become fortunate, how he thought he was unfortunate dismantled. There are certain ways, you see, life appears as a problem or it appears as a solution. Certain moments there's a problem and you got to be the solution to it. Certain moments, you know, there are solutions and you will be the problem. But you decide the roar of your vision as an existential and experiential being. The roars of experience in the eyes of existence. That is the only path of an advanced civilization. We are as advanced as the dimensions we consider. We are as advanced as the complexity we envision and the simplicity we can return to. And so that's when you become a pilot of consciousness. When the objective realms all bow to your attention, when suddenly the subjective realms all bow to your attention, and then even the emotions stand quietly like the lords of karma. And then comes the great silence. The great silence is a moment in your life where it's as if the whole cosmos, like a librarian, is telling you shh, and it's like as the whole cosmos is shushing you into divine silence. I'm telling you, it's a silence that will destroy the archetypes. It will destroy not the archetype, the dependence on the archetype. You can animate subjectivity any moment. Just like how easy it is to speak, language is an evocational technology. Our knowledge is dressed in the garb of language, and therefore, in some sense, if there is animation there. And you know, it's honestly fascinating that our eyes, our biological eyes, are not above us. I would think automatically that if this creature was trying to survive, it would at least notice that sight would be important. So I often wonder why our eyes are not like way above on the top of our heads. You know, sometimes why it's, do you know what I mean? I wondered about this. Why evolution did not try to make sight like a flagpole, you know, biologically. And I can tell you that a lot of things in life start off being unconditional. Did you have a choice in how you were born? Did you have a choice in how your face looks like? Did you have a choice in your DNA? No, it didn't even matter, the choice. There was nothing to even choose. It was an appearance arose, expression arose. Now, this creature that's on this rock in the middle of nowhere, we have to acknowledge it, because I speak not to only immaterialists, but materialists as well. And I'm saying, okay, you're seeing a world of matter, so what does that mean about your philosophies? That means all man's philosophy in a purely materialistic realm is just hovering in the middle of nowhere. They ask us, why did you do that? You're like, hey, why are we on a rock in the middle of nowhere? So you see, it's incredible. We have planted subjective designs in objectivity. And that has become the meaning of our life. That means, I think, if they tell me there's two people and one person, I have a Tim Hortons coffee cup, okay? There's a difference between asking someone, what is this? And them saying, yo, man, this is Tim Hortons coffee. You know, and you asking somebody and them saying, this is my attention. This is an object. Its meaning is given. And think about your life and all the moments of your life where as much as somebody gave value to you, you gave value to the moment. And it's in these, they say, there was this book, I haven't read it, but I remember hearing somebody talk about it. It was called something, the Way of the Superior Man, something like that. And in it, the guy was speaking about how in modern times we have a sort of downfall of the essence of masculinity. Do you see? There were certain firm archetypal pillars, and in modern times, due to various sectors of our civilization attaining liberation, suddenly it's like value is becoming multi accessible. Do you know? So it's as if like back in the day, the warrior had less reasons to doubt himself because there was less to consider. There was less information. There was less context to the world. Nowadays, there is so many contexts. Even if you don't have a context, just Google. You know, sometimes people think knowledge is about learning the concepts. Let me tell you, you'll never learn a concept if you don't understand its context. You know, what that means is as much as it is important for a nature, I don't know, zoologist or something to study a lion, it is also important to study the environment of the lion, which is its motivation. And this is why, you know, they said to this guy and this quantum physicist, I think it was Niels Bohr, I don't know who it was. I don't know who it was. But it was this quantum physicist. They asked him, hey, man, what are these results like? These experiment results about quantum physics. And the guy's like, listen, man, it's as if we took like this cheetah, this jaguar from like the forest or somewhere, from the field and from its natural environment. We put it in a cage. Now a caged animal we're studying. That means a caged animal is not the same animal that it was in its freedom. You are not the same being when you are not free to yourself. Did you know that? That means there is a difference between a lion that is caged internally and a lion that is not caged. There's even a perfect story to demonstrate this, you know, and I'm going to animate it in a good way. So I want you to imagine before Simba from The Lion King was born, what's the father's name? Mufasa? I don't know. Simba's dad. Yeah, okay, I got to Google this. Jesus Christ. Yo, Simba's dad is probably a band. Okay, guys, Mufasa, I got it right. So imagine Mufasa, before Simba is born, is a king, and he's going around his kingdom. And he's like, sometimes there are kings that because they fear the world, because they didn't start from the bottom, they just started from the top, they're not comfortable going to the bottom. You know, and so this king was comfortable in the sense that he was going and just exploring the edges of his kingdom. Do you know? And suddenly he comes by a farm where there's a bunch of sheep, and in the middle of the sheep he sees a grown-ass lion just in the middle of the sheep. You know? And this Lion King, he gets shocked. He studies the situation, and he goes there and he just shouts. He's like, what is this? And he shouts, lion! And in that instant, it's as if like there's no response. There's no response. It's like nobody, not even the sheep look, let's say, and not even the lion looks. And then this Lion King says, sheep! And then all of them look, and he sees that this is a lion that thinks he's a sheep, right? This lion was raised with sheep, and in the world of the sheep, he was a great hero. You can imagine. He was the bravest sheep of them all. You know, he was a sheep where all the other sheep would come to this lion that thinks is a sheep, and it's like, hey, you don't want to eat dinner? And you don't want to eat grass? And this sheep, the lion that thinks is the sheep, says, no, I'm fasting. I'm in samadhi. Anyways, what I'm saying is, a king has seen a member of his kingdom not kingdom, you know. He's seeing a lion live outside of its nature. That's the problem of living with sheep. So anyways, the lion roars. And in his roar, in that instant, all the sheep run away But this lion that thinks it's a sheep, he's like, why am I not scared? And he just stands there, you know, like the bravest sheep of them all. In a secretly a lion, you know. The Lion King looks at him and says, sheep, come here. And this sheep trusts his destiny in that moment, and he goes. And in that second, the Lion King says, come with me. You know, and this sheep, this lion that thinks it's a sheep, I gotta say sheep lion, guys, I can't keep repeating. This sheep lion, son. This lion that thinks it's a sheep follows this Lion King, suddenly comes by a pond. The Lion King says, look at yourself. And he looks at himself. And the Lion King says, what do you see? And there's a silence. And the guy says, I see a sheep. The lion that thinks it's a sheep says, I see a sheep. And then the Lion King roars and says, look at my reflection. What do you see? And in that instant, for the first time, this lion that thinks it's a sheep is like, holy shit, I'm a lion. Holy shit, I knew it. You know, it's like, that's why I hated grass, you know? So, really, that's the point, guys. And what happened there? There's an important moral to take away here. That internally, the lion felt like a sheep. He had the mind of a sheep, but the body of a lion. And he realized that he was never the mind of a sheep. And that's what I'm telling you, how the human kind of enlightenment game is. That it's not about you attaining your greatest desire. What is this, like heaven? You know, this is enlightenment is about contentment through an acknowledgement of emptiness, that the spectrum arose instantaneously, spontaneously, and if I have no opinion on a seed that sprouted and became a tree, how dare I, in some sense, try to shape something that at its core is everything? Like, do you know what I mean? It's we're not even playing subconscious God games, because there's a notion that I think the more you act against an idea in objective reality, the more you subjectively go to it. That means I think atheists have theist-like dreams, and theists have a lot of atheist-like dreams. You know, because they're both drawn by their fear. One is drawn by the fear of its irrationality, the other is drawn by the fear of its non-abidance. You see, the religious mindset, I find myself kind of blessed, because the world is becoming incredibly secular. And as it is becoming secular, it's like it has no choice. You want to use the new technologies, you got to understand the cultures where the knowledge for those societies kind of arose. But I'm saying it's as if like every ideology is a ship. And sometimes you're born on that ship. You know, you're born on a ship of a certain way that the world's meaning is moving. And when I freed the world from myself, the world also freed itself from me. And that's when I truly felt that, all right, the karmic Rubik's Cube was solved. It's strange, but you have to build paradise from within. You have to build it. That means a creature of design means the design will be implemented. A seed of an apple tree, you plant it, it becomes an apple tree, and it serves. It gives its fruit. And I find every genetical design is like that. It's like the DNA is a seed constantly of the next generation of the tree being passed down, being passed down. It's like the seed constantly, in some sense, arising in the soil of an animal, as if consciousness was an extraterrestrial gaze in a terrestrial realm. It was the unknown in the knowledge. Right now, we are saying that because we are creatures of thought and language, we're trying to rationalize and conceptualize the whole cosmic landscape. This is going to be like an arcade. Right now, I want you to think that there is maybe like only 10% progress occurring for the civilization, and the rest of it is like an ideological arcade. You know, you go to an arcade, you see all those kind of gaming stations or whatever. So similarly, it's like that. It's like that, that people are entertaining their lives because there is a fear of collective emergence. But this fear of collective emergence, I'm telling, regardless of how much you fear something, if you know your children's children will confront it, you will dare to. That means living for yourself, it may be self-gratifying. You may enjoy a hedonistic lifestyle. But let me tell you this, unless you serve your species, you will feel you never saw them. You never saw it. When we suddenly change the idea around the world that it's not currency that should our attention should be on, but it is the exchange that is the vitality of a collective movement. And it's savage. It's crazy, guys. I have no idea why the world is the way it is, you know? I constantly, my mind attempts. It's kind of like a kid trying to imagine God, you know. Me trying to attempt the greatness of the civilization is unfathomable, because the more I wonder, the more information is entertained in that scope of wonder. It's like, how does the hamster get out of the wheel? Two options. Either the wheel stops, the wheel feels, oh, this person feels life is tough and is like desperate and okay, let me help. You know, like some people are waiting for hidden saviors to save them. But let me tell you, the only thing that a savior can do is literally splash, like this is a strange statement to say, but to splash a mirror on your face, to awaken you to the self mover. I mean, that doesn't sound as epic, but the self mover. No, okay. Let's see if I can. It doesn't feel complete, you know. Self-generated movement, you know. Many people don't realize that their fears are their salvation. If you don't confront the fear is going to be like, what the hell, man? You had to confront me to grow, you know, and you didn't confront me. The world we live in and the worlds that live in us. The mind is very fascinating. It gives access to parallel potentials of every moment. I remember there was this movie called Chronicles of Riddick. In it, if you imagine, if you see the last scene of the film, you see there's this bad guy who he moves into different locations before like others. You know, he has parallel. It's like he can experience multiple locations. You know, and I find we as human beings, our multidimensionality is actually behind our eyes. And when we understand the fabric of the nature of consciousness, there's two views. Either consciousness is substance oriented, and because it's substance oriented, in some sense, we just have to study the laws of nature and figure out, or consciousness is a living phenomena where we are the ego, not the ego, we are an archetypal awareness. That means like, if anybody asks you who you are, you're instantly, in order to respond, you have to be a character in a story. In order to speak, you have to be a character in a story. But this doesn't mean ultimately the experiencer is bound to its characteristics and its environment. to treat the mind as something that one can must become an ally with. Do you know that means when I was younger, my interpretation of the mind was just okay, sophisticated machine, but in kind of now it has changed. It's an animate, living relationship of the potential livelihood that this the intelligence has. I just got interrupted by my own voice. Fascinating. Sorry guys, I'm in a cheerful mood today because this was a very huge realization, that I realized nothing ever bad has happened to me. I just have not understood it, and I've just stopped and kind of decided a sort of interpretation. You can think about it this way, that anything that's happened to you in your life, you can just meditate on it and concentrate on it and to see really what it meant to you. And as you keep doing it, more ideas come. Sometimes I have like intense experience and I just sit down and I'm still and quiet and I close my mind and I close my eyes, and in that second I just sit there to process what just happened. And when my intelligence feels completely as if the ripples of my mind has settled, then I begin. Because it's all about quality of living. People think that survival is, it's like, look at the kind of system that civilization is. Like, I understand the importance of currency. I understand that currency and the economical system is the evolution of bartering patterns. Back in the day, it was like people, after they learned to speak, what happened? They spoke to one another and they traded. You know, they had exchanges of not just communication, but like they traded objects with one another, and eventually the economical system kind of crystallized into what we see it is today. And really the human being's attention is on their resource, not realizing that if the resource was provided, the mind would be free. You know, it's kind of hard. You know, it's like, how can you visualize a world without chaos and a world without order? It's kind of like an existential being trying to wonder what non-existence is like. You see, after some point, it's like the reason there is no thoughts is because you can't do anything. It's like you're getting an experience that you can literally have no comment on, you know. And those are moments where your presence is moving you, compared to your personality moving you. In the subtitle, I've spoken about spheres of awareness. So when one sees their misunderstanding is just their a sort of limited scope, as if like they just stopped reading the book at like halfway or something. So you see, it's like if you read the rest of the book, perhaps the meaning, the failure you had, the suffering that you interpret is just a snapshot of what it looks like from that moment, from that emotional range. There's this story I want to share before I get into the spheres of awareness and what I mean by that. There's this kid, you know, that his father is a carpenter, and he sees his father is working on this like next level kind of like table, giant table for his family. The kid looks at his father and says, "Dad, I want to be a Shaolin monk." And the father's like, "Son, we're carpenters. What do you mean you want to be a Shaolin monk?" And the kid says, "Dad, please, it's my calling. I have to become a Shaolin monk." And the father's like, "Oh my God, this kid is so young talking about his spiritual calling." It's like, okay, you know. And the father kind of, they walk by they go by a Shaolin temple. The kid convinces the father, And the father is wise enough to let his son's free will develop. And the father and the son are going by the Shaolin temple, and strangely, as they're getting to the entrance, they see the headmaster of the Shaolin temple is also walking straight towards the entrance, as if this strange coincidence, you know? And the headmaster is there, and the moment the kid sees the headmaster, as if he was a Shaolin monk in a past life or something, he just suddenly just bows in front of this guy and says, please accept me as a student. You know, some honorable kind of loyal thing he does. And in that second, the father and the Shaolin monk, the father and the Shaolin monk, the father and the Shaolin monk just look at each other, and the Shaolin monk just kind of, headmaster just bows, nods his head. It's like, don't worry, you know, we'll take care of him here, you know. And the father says, okay, you know, and the Shaolin monk says, okay, go to your quarters, like gives the kid an instruction, instantly welcomes him into in the environment of his enthusiasm, you know. Great, I've at least seen in my life, the greatest teachers I've witnessed were ones that they grabbed my enthusiasm before it left, you know. It's like those are some of the most enlightened beings you see, you know. Really, it's about care, I think, ultimately. But anyways, so this kid goes to this Shaolin thing, the father goes back, and the years are passing by. And this kid's growing up in this Shaolin thing, but something strange happens, that he's going on learning the basics like with everybody else. And after he's learned the basics, when it comes to the advanced training, suddenly in that moment, he says, the headmaster comes to the kid and he's like, you have a special task. Okay, your training is different than everybody else's, and tells the kid to go inside this room where there's a bucket of water. And that kid had to, with the palm of his hands, both palms of his hands, keep slapping the water in that bucket. You know, this was like his Shaolin training. And the kid's like, okay, all right, I'll try this. You know, he's like, okay, sir, and he does it. Then he sees every day, he goes and tells the master, and the master's like, no, you got to keep doing that. And he's just endlessly, the days are going by, he's seeing everybody else moving past him, kind of learning all the other Shaolin techniques, and he's just there kind of slapping water in a bucket. You know? And he's getting frustrated, and there's this anger, and he has moments where it's like he's like slapping the water in the bucket, and the water is hitting his face, and it's like you don't know if he's crying or not, like while it's hitting. It's like this, like he's going through various moments of his emotional realities as he's just slapping this water in a bucket. So what happens? They get a sabbatical or something. So these monks are given a chance to go and visit their families, the students, you know. And he gets incredibly frustrated, this kid. You know, he came with such passion, and what happened? He goes back home and he finds himself like at his house door, and he knocks, and suddenly it's his, let's say it's his, like, you know, younger brother, you know, the second oldest son of the family, and he opens the door and he's like acting as if like he's not there. So anyways, the father sees this, welcomes him, brings him home. They all celebrate. The family gets excited. That super advanced table the father was working on is now in the kitchen. You know, this next level table, like giant table, you know, like it's like very heavy, you know. And the father's like, my Shaolin monk son has come back. It's like, yeah, the father feels as if like, you know, his son is giving value to his father's life. You know, and the father's like, holy shit, my son's a Shaolin monk. Like, but dinner begins. The father says, tonight you sit at the front of the table, you know, and the Shaolin monk kid is there, and the father now is there, and they're all listening, you know, and the second oldest brother is doubting the guy, you know, and the father's like, son, tell me, you know, I'm your father, tell me, what did you learn? Tell me the secrets of the Shaolin monk you've learned, you know, tell me what you've learned, you know, the myths that they say about the Shaolin monk, right? And in that moment, this kid just looks at the moment, and his nature is of an honest one. So he just gets angry, you know? And in that moment, you know how some people get angry? They just like slap the whatever's the object in front of them, you know, kind of, and they get up, you know? So similarly, this kid slaps the table to get up, and he's about to say, "I didn't learn anything, god damn it," you know? And right when he's doing that, his hand, before he even the words leave his mouth, his hand moves and automatically breaks this giant table, like instantly breaks it. All those years of him slapping, you know, that water, thinking meaninglessness, it's meaningless, it's meaningless. In that moment, he saw the power he had cultivated. And the father's like, holy shit, this kid with the palm of his hand just broke this table I've been working on for 20 years. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. So that's the moral of the story, you know. It's like his misunderstanding was the suffering until he saw the ability. I remember first finding out how a lot of philosophy was behavioral, and it had to do with the professions of people back in the day. Even a lot of people's last names came from their profession, and it was the behavior of people that really began fabricating, even solidifying the linguistic simulation, language in our lives. The mystery of life is so fascinating. It's like a light has been turned on, and we're like, whose hand turned it on? Did the hand of the conscious self, or was it the unconscious? And how is it that we assume our conscious realm is life, filled with life, but our unconscious is lifeless? It's like, how do we know there are not other civilizations like us? And how do we know that all civilizations are not on one field of intelligence? You know, when I said spheres of awareness here, guys, I wrote a book called The Mentor Sphere. I haven't put it online. I'm going to kind of work on that, kind of create a sort of online library. I wrote this book called The Inventor Sphere. In it, I had this idea that every inventor ever on the planet was a human being that had a reception, like their mind became like an antenna that accessed the inventor sphere. And the inventor sphere was this kind of giant, I saw it as this giant sphere where all the genius and all the greatest inventions of existence are originating from. You know, so it's like a hidden room where the mind has access to an eternal rendition of temporal simulations. So what it means is you can live endless lives in an instant. In an instant. You see, the instant, the word instant is so powerful. It is a rebel in the realm of language against time, because the instantaneous cannot be referred to. It just is. When we wonder how we're being, it's just things that are. Do you know? But what we do, what we will do, and it's kind of strange because it's like survival is preparation, then application. Preparation, then application. It's like, or you can say observance, action, observance, action, observance, action. And this rhythm, if you just maintain it, you objectively survive. And your psychology will automatically gravitate to a healthy point because you are refreshing it. Imagine constantly refreshing. It's like writing a Facebook status but not pressing post, and then refreshing the browser and seeing it's wiped, and then refreshing the browser. You're going to eventually see that the life of the body is very different than the life of the mind. The life of the mind is attributeless to itself. The life of the body is where how the attributes are. Do you know? There is a very interesting thought. I remember I don't know. There was a sometimes how people are can influence how you are as a being. If we say a creature is influenced by its ecosystem, we can say other people's minds are part of our ecosystem. Do you know? That means it's like somebody was saying that it's like the whole point of a responsible civilization is that your rights become my rights, your freedoms become my freedom. Because in that case, then the archetype is not alone against the world, right? So I kind of looked at this whole wave of political correctness occurring in let's say Western civilization and in Western societies, and I wondered what's happening here, and I realized it is a mixture of boredom, honest care for freedom, and chaotic complexity of too many factors in one moment. That means if one person speaks to you, maybe you can handle that. If two people speak to you at the same time, yeah, you can still handle that. If three people speak to you at the same time, you have to pause the third person, and you have to bring in a system where you're pausing one person listening to two and then pausing another person listening to two, you know? And then if it becomes more, I don't know, like there are the system becomes more, it's like the more dimensions are added, the more energy is required to maintain those dimensions. The more complex your outlook on life, actually the more energy life is taking, it's taking for that conception to occur. When I say more energy, it's because it's strange, because even though I have this view that our neurology kind of course the neurons are moving all the time, and the brain state is never in the same all the time. You know, it's strange. Even though we our bodies require to be at room temperature, but the psychology is, there's no room temperature for our psychology. You know, a person can be upset, a person can be happy, a person can have various outlooks and outtakes on the present living moment. But ultimately, when we ask what is the value, where, guess what? You're stranded on the island of your inner realm. This is life. This is life's design. This is what they don't tell you. This is what why shyness is an inner defeat. Why introversion is an excuse. Why extroversion is also an excuse. Reality is way multidimensional and way changing. That means we are learning that just like how we treat the weather, we have to treat our psychology. And the way it is that you have to observe it. If you don't observe something, you have no control. You know, if you can't see in front of you through the windshield of the car, if the window in front of you, because of the snow and rain, that means you cannot drive, for example. You know, it's all about as clarity increases, the percentage of abstract retaliation to ignorance kind of decreases. Here's the idea. Are you meant to be something new for the world, or are you meant to fit into the past? Pretty much human beings are being born, and some of them are walking to the future and some of them are walking to the past. Those walk in the future, they are not burdened by the past. Those who are walking towards the past will not only feel they're missing out on the future, but they'll see they can't change the past. This is why it's like the grand question comes, why have you considered weakness first before strength? Why has the psychology arose doubting its position? Because that doubt could be endless. You know, it's They ask, it's hilarious. A lot of people think this enlightenment game takes years and years and years and years of, serious deep meditation. Of course, as I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm not commenting on the serious kind of ancient lineages in Tibetan Buddhism and various other traditions, Zen traditions. But I'm saying that we have to kind of realize, is a story really what we hunger for? Or is it the experience of involvement with a living process beyond ourselves? I think it's the latter. When your own life experiences and memories become like a museum, where you can just close your eyes, remember a moment, and it's as if you're still there, as if a part of your attention never left the eternity of that moment. Some say it's a simulation reality machine. Some people have this view that it's like it's what you say it is, the world. I don't doubt that, because that was the source of magic. Magic, the reason we call it spelling, the reason it's key is because language was a box over the world. It was a world inside a world. And when you get somebody's attention stuck on a world inside a world, they perform less well on the world outside. So it's very important that just like the person washes their face in the morning, similarly it's like washing your reality. Like, it's kind of like basking in inefficiency until you realize efficiency is possible. When you know something is possible, that's the birth of inspiration. Before something is still impossible to you, you won't attempt it, you won't care for it, you know. And so the thing is, most people won't invest in things that they don't see the result of beforehand. It's like more people want weather forecasts for actions, not realizing that the marketplace is a jungle. That means regardless of your business planning, it's like the survival of the fittest business entity. The business that could adjust its business model correctly to its market environment. When you realize that all the teachers of the world are hiding something, hiding a strange fact, that the void is here, the void becomes the mirror. I can't tell you how many times in life where without the suffering I would not have the shape of my eyes now, like the shape of my sight. It's as if, imagine, like, this is kind of playful, but imagine sight was invisible clay, and this clay was being shaped. It's invisible, but it's there, and it's being shaped and sculpted in accordance to the experiences. I've had dreams where the dream has changed me. That means I had a dream, I woke up and I knew I had a different philosophy on the whole universe, different outlook on it. The significance of the moment is crucial, and I think an advanced civilization is a civilization that has found the balance between a simple component and a complex component. That means we should have civilization be designed like a yin-yang symbol. Do you know? What does that mean? That means we should have in the most cities, in the most like urban environments, suddenly a huge natural environment, like the sphere, like the black sphere in the white area of the yin yang symbol, or the white sphere in the black area of the yin yang symbol. We should have civilization have access to various modes of seeing itself. That freedom is not there. Go ask the average kid. I bet you, just try this out. Go ask the average person and tell them, where do you think life is, how do you think your civilization looks in 100 years? Or even ask them 200 years. And to just see how they would even approach it. And you're going to see a lot of people have studied their inner, they have paid more attention to their inner life than their outer life. Execution without clarity is defeat. Clarity is alignment. It's not a kind of adapting like survival, it's alignment. So you can say the body needs to survive, the mind needs to align. And when the mind aligns, it discovers itself as a field. When you discover yourself as a field of intelligence, your subtler planes, your abstraction shifts. That means, think of it this way, that your imagination is based on how you see the world. So when your view of the world changes, the way your imagination moves and projects is also different. That means, what can you really do with suffering? What can you do with nature? All you can do is look back at it and watch. You can have various thoughts, you can have various intentions in this world, but eventually it's like we are just like that squirrel on that branch. We are in a cosmic landscape much more complex than our experience of life provides. So philosophers are the backup program of civilization when the unknown, when the intellect tries to deny and reject the existence of the unknown. So what does that mean? That means it's like when you realize nobody knows, just listen to how I'm saying it, nobody knows, and it's a mental phenomenon. It's strange, but the unknown will no longer be unknown once your known is no longer known the same way. There's a story about Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon finds himself with not only the French army but all the French people behind him, and he finds himself and his men reaching the palace, and he is going to claim the throne, like Game of Thrones style. He's going there to, in some sense, be emperor. And in the palace there is one of those Louis that's scared, one of those Louis kings that's scared, you know, Louis 14, I don't know, I could be wrong here, but one of the Louis, you know. And this king evidently did not retaliate, did not do anything, was just hiding in a bunker pretty much as a king. You know, he didn't have the mind of a king, that king, you know. And so the palace guards, of course, they are Frenchmen and they're patriots, and they in some sense will till their last breath kind of defend their empire and defend their king, because it's their post. That means Napoleon understands that these guards are, so okay, I forgot to mention this. So his Frenchmen are now pointing guns at the palace guards, who are other Frenchmen, and Napoleon sees French people pointing guns at French people, and he's like, no, he's like this, he sees beyond, you know. And so the palace guard is defending and the guns are pointed, and suddenly Napoleon, he just raises his hand, just slightly raises his hand, you know, and then slowly brings his hand down, and all his men put down their weapons. And now he walks in front of the palace gate where all the guards are, and the guards all point their guns at Napoleon. So in that moment, if they like all shot, it would be like a ridiculous shotgun, you know. So in that moment, excuse me, in that moment, Napoleon, there's a strange calmness. He opens his jacket, and it's winter, and he opens his jacket as if like, I'm vulnerable. He's making himself vulnerable. And he starts shouting as if like, Simba roaring, I think this is the first time anyone's kind of related Napoleon to the Lion King. I think this is an important moment. Napoleon looks at the guards and says, "Who dares shoot their emperor? Who dares shoot their emperor? Who dares shoot their emperor?" Like he's shouting it with such intensity, as if he already is emperor. As if he's looking at those palace guards and he's like, what kind of emperor are you loyal to? A man who hides, or a man who in some sense moves forth? So in that moment, the palace guards all drop their gun and they're in tears and they say, "Our emperor!" And Napoleon, it's like, becomes emperor. And there's even an artist painting that depicts this. I don't know what the painting is, but I don't think I have a way of finding it now. But there's a painting. There's a very awesome painting by, I think the guy's name is Jean. I don't know. Jacques. I don't know. This artist drew an incredible painting of this moment. So before he was emperor, he was emperor. Before he was liberated, he was liberated. Before the unknown, he knew. Before he knew, he was the unknown. I think ultimately we have to see that because there's more to understand, whatever conclusion temporarily taken is a misunderstanding, because the understanding has deeper dimensions. Now, we can, of course, walk in certain domains of thought where the sphere of awareness moves in a way where, I don't know, like we have Jean-Paul Sartre, an existential atheist, who has this view that there doesn't need to even be the separation of the essence from the substance, from the surface. That means it's like we don't need to separate the surface of the ocean with its depth. That means there is no separation. There is no heaven and earth. They are the same moment. So you see, there are many pathways. Pretty much all philosophy is a landscape of how much the dualism is being embraced or how much the dualism is being rejected. Any person who observes landscape, I fundamentally, I consider myself a creature of design. That means before I was anything in this world, I was a designer. I was looking at designs. I was looking at shape be my life. It's like we're life forms. I was like alive and observing the form, And it's very fascinating. We are preserved in a greater system of intelligence. Now, to ascribe a subjective face is maybe crucial to acknowledge, but not the only thing to acknowledge. I remember I was speaking to this person. I won't give any details, but I remember he had a Islamic viewpoint, and of course I was also raised in an Islamic environment, like till the age of 7, and then I came to Canada. I guess every person gets pulled towards their nature, but this person, I remember speaking about evolution, and he got offended. And in some sense, I realized that there's so many ways to hold the world behind our eyes. At least we know we have a choice. At least whether you believe in God or not, it's like there is free will. You know, that free will is important to acknowledge, and to acknowledge what freedom means, you know? Because seldom this is said, even though in religious societies there's strict judgment on behavior, but I will tell you, it's as if, like, strangely they say only God knows what's in your heart. Only the truth knows the truth. So if you categorize yourself as not close to the truth, how can you even acknowledge it? If you don't consider that there is reality, you're perhaps floating in imagination. That means life becomes a dream when you stop being responsible for it. When you become responsible for it, it can't be a dream anymore, because the conscious effort accumulates. It builds up. The actions build up. For some reason, guys, I feel we should go into a quote tunnel of Leo Tolstoy quotes. I don't know why, but right now, let's see what Leo Tolstoy has to say to the world. Okay. Leo Tolstoy. Wrong does not cease to be wrong because the majority share in it. And guys, of course, Leo Tolstoy is one of the great. He's a Russian philosopher. He's one of the great philosophers and minds of our world. And his work must be. I definitely recommend people to study his work. You know. So, anyways, check this out. Leo Tolstoy says wrong does not cease to be wrong because the majority share in it. He says truth, like gold, is to be obtained not by its growth, but by washing away from it all that is not gold. He says everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself. Tolstoy says respect was invented to cover the empty place where love should be. Wow. 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 Whew. That's an incredible sentence. Respect was invented to cover the empty place where love should be. The evolution of respect is love. That means a society that respects itself to govern eventually will require to love itself to advance the mind. Anyways, Leo Tolstoy says, it is amazing how complete is the delusion that beauty is goodness. I think many people understand this in the nightclub, you know, when they go clubbing, you know. But anyways, only people who are capable of loving strongly can also suffer great sorrow. But this same necessity of loving serves to counteract their grief and heals them. Guys, listen to this next quote he says. He says, if you want to be happy, be. Rummaging in our souls, we often dig up something that ought to have lain there unnoticed. Tolstoy says if you look for perfection, you'll never be content. He says you can love a person dear to you with a human love, but an enemy can only be loved with divine love. Tolstoy says, let us forgive each other, only then will we live in peace. And that's true, guys. If human beings endlessly till the end of time kept judging each other based on their past, of course there'd be endless reasons to hate on the world. You know? Tolstoy says if one loves anyone, one loves the whole person, just as they are and not as one would like them to be. He says, I often think that men don't understand what is noble and what is ignorant, though they always talk about it. The changes in our life must come from the impossibility to live, otherwise to the demands of our conscience, not from our mental resolution to try a new form of life. Okay. This one's definitely one to get into. The changes in our life must come from the impossibility to live, otherwise to the demands of our conscience, not from our mental resolution to try a new form of life. Wow. So he's saying you change your life not because you want something just new. He says you change your life by recognizing the impossibility of certain comfortable patterns in your psychology. So it's kind of actually a strange Buddhic thought where it's like through emptiness. That means what it is kind of like the person is falling in front of the gods. The person is in some sense failing, but in that failure is accessing the true limits of reality. I'll read the quote again. He says, the changes in our life must come from the impossibility to live, otherwise to the demands of our conscience, not from our mental resolution to try a new form of life. That means it's impossible to live up to the perfection of the demands of your conscience, and your life changes in the realization. Oh, I see what it is. It's kind of like when you discover something the more as it is, that's the thing that liberates you rather than you wanting it to be something else. I think maybe that's the angle he's taking. Tolstoy says each person's task in life is to become an increasingly better person. It's not given to people to judge what's right or wrong. People have eternally been mistaken and will be mistaken, and in nothing more than in what they consider right and wrong. There is no greatness where simplicity, goodness, and truth are absent. Wow, listen to this one. He says, this is the last quote from Tolstoy, guys. He says, in the name of God, stop a moment, cease your work, look around you. He's saying, observe. And that's where the knowledge is, in how you experience as the observer, not in just the content that just comes in front of this camera view. So anyways, guys, the source of suffering is misunderstanding. Because we suffer, because we are not perfect, not realizing an evolving system is not about perfection, it's about advancement. Advancement means experiential navigation. It means quality of the experience moving in this world. And it has to do with acknowledging the gentleness, the simplicity of your moment. I find it how fascinating. People look at animals and they're like, look at that majestic lion. Look at that majestic eagle. Look at that majestic, what is that, a snake? Oh shit, the guy starts running. But what it is like, it's like we observe nature. We see its beauty. We see the beauty of wildlife, but how do we not see the beauty of the wilderness of our minds? Why do we bound it to the dichotomy, a sort of dualistic position of imagination, reality? It's either true or it's not. And what is this? We have in some sense, it's like the lens is, or how would I say it? Like, it's like, think as if you have once in a lifetime membership access to conscious existence. You've paid for this membership and you're in this gym. This gym is the whole cosmos. So now you're wondering, what do I do? I'm here, you know? And so most people, they get taken by the voices of their environment. Very few people look in the mirror and then make a decision about who they are or what things, how they need to move, you know? Leo Tolstoy said the most incredible thing. He said, look around you, and that's it, guys. That is the birth of the philosopher, the scientist, and every branch of knowledge that is just eyes upon the world translating into language. sight translating into language. For me, I realize the perfection that language seeks is geometry. So it's a geometrical perfection. And so, of course, I will give many talks on how geometrical abstraction behind one's eyes is can be, I don't want to say utilized, but it's kind of like when you get to know the rhythms of your own mind, then you begin to no longer want something from the process. You co-creatively live with your own intelligence. And when I say co-creatively, I'm not saying that you're fragmented from who you are. I'm not saying you're multiple selves. I'm telling you that you are one moment that is projecting multiple selves. So it's recognizing that all phenomenology, every story that has existed in the mind of man existed in a moment. And that moment is everything. So for me, I'm like, a philosopher looks at religion and sees a riddle to the cosmos. A scientist looks at religion and sees a distraction. And a religious person looks at religion and feels there's nowhere else to go. So really, it's about who you are as a being. It's about the dimensions of character that develop. It's about how your experiences shape you. And how, as I'm even saying this, you're still, every moment, you're like an experiencer. This awareness is here. Think of it this way. People get hungry, correct? People get hungry and they go eat food. So check this out. What if the mind gets hungry? And what is it hunger? Is it possible that it's hungering an escape out of its endless processing, data processing? Is that what karma could have been? Or is it that it's seeking a resolution to the moment? Some people say the meaning of life is happiness because when you are in a moment of happiness, there is freedom. You know, any ideology that gives you your personal emotional freedom, in some sense, you will just agree with. You know, it's very few people who care about truth, and children are dishonored when they say children are jaded as they grow up. But in some sense, it's not that they're jaded; they are dishonored. Their ethical purity is dishonored. Their simplistic view of how simple and pleasant life is dishonored. And when that is dishonored, it's like, when imagine someone. It's like sometimes it's very hard to forgive being pushed by the world. The only way you can forgive it is either extinguishing the flame internally, or in some sense realizing regardless, time moves on. Time heals everything because you stop looking at the things that bother you. You know? That's forgiveness. You know, like a busy man running late for work. Somebody hits him accidentally, and the guy's like, "Sorry, man," and he's like, "Forgive me." You know, the guy says, "Forgive me," and he's like, "Okay, man, okay, I gotta go." And so instant forgiveness, the thought, the attention of the human being no longer needed to be on that design of subjective reality. The person was freed from that subjective content. They realized their attention is not the content. I remember sitting on a rock in Edwards Gardens in Toronto, where I live, and I remember thinking to myself, who am I? Like, what is this? What is this life? And in that moment, I realized my mind keeps projecting subjective image. And it was for the first time I noticed my thoughts to be like a screen where projections are coming. And I just started watching my thoughts. It's strange. And I realized, how could my thought be the truth of reality? My thought is just like certain paint I just threw on a canvas in one moment. So I realized the deeper dimensions that philosophers, there's certain realms of philosophy. Philosophers, as much as they in some sense may not have the same outlook on life as scientists, certain scientists, but what I could tell you, philosophy relies on technology. I find it's like this. I find philosophy, science, and religion to be like three brothers. Religion is the smallest brother. We have then the scientist, the middle brother, and then we have the philosopher. Or no, let me say it again. We would have the oldest brother be religion. We will have the middle brother be the philosopher and the younger brother to be science. I'm just going based on this in accordance to the timeline of these ideological movements. So the scientist is the I don't know. I think it doesn't fit. It still doesn't fit, you know. I remember speaking about it a while ago though. It was just this idea that it's like a city of ideology, and these ideologies are living with one another. And so when you realize every ideology, its history is how it has lived in the minds of people, then your outlook on the utility of subjectivity changes. In that moment on the rock where I saw, oh my God, I asked myself, who am I? And my mind keeps projecting a different answer every time. So how could I be all these answers? So I realized my subjectivity is in some sense, it's a tool. It's strangely like something that's beaming out of your forehead, you know? So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this talk was helpful, and if you don't learn from your suffering, if you don't see suffering, or let me say it like this, without confronting suffering, how could you know you are not suffering? Life is very fascinating. It's kind of like, again, how the Zen masters say, climb the mountain by starting at the top. Give yourself, like for one day, have, I don't know, kind of like one day, take a vow of silence and see what happens. I mean, probably that won't work in modern society. But I don't know, guys. It's like you're a creature that's going through various states of mind, and it's up to nobody else has your eyes. So it's your eyes. It's the free will's job to free itself, to redefine itself, re-envision itself. Confront the void to realize the infinite potential of the manifest. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Much blessings and namaste.